In the early 1960s, one Australian company tried something bold. A cement mixer and washing machine manufacturer, Lightburn Co. Limited, based in Adelaide, South Australia, decided to make a car. Not just any car, but one of the strangest and most unique microcars ever built. Led by Harold Lightburn, a former boxer turned inventor, the company rolled out a small fiberglass-bodied car called the Lightburn Zeta sedan. This was not from a car factory. It was built where dishwashers and power tools were made. And it shows. The Lightburn Zeta was launched in late 1963 with a price of just £595, which made it the cheapest new car in Australia at the time. It was built to be a second family car, something a suburban mother could use to drive to the shops or pick up the kids. The Zeta came in a few different types. There was the basic Zeta sedan, also called the runabout. There was a deluxe version with more features. Then there was the Zeta Utility, a small two-door truck with a pickup bed. The most unusual version was the Zeta Sports, a tiny two-seater roadster that had no doors at all. The Zeta sedan was powered by a Villiers 324cc single-cylinder two-stroke engine, which made about 16 horsepower. It was mounted in the front and drove the front wheels. The Zeta had a 4-speed gearbox, but it did not have a real reverse gear. Instead, to back up, you had to turn off the engine and restart it in the other direction. Then you could go backward using the same gears. That meant the Zeta had 4 reverse gears. The Zeta was built on a steel frame with a one-piece fiberglass body. It had steel doors and used Perspex plastic for the side and rear windows. The windshield was laminated glass. It had drum brakes and tiny 12-inch tires. The whole car weighed about 880 pounds. The top speed was about 60 miles per hour. The car's fuel tank sat behind the dashboard and was gravity-fed. There was a triangular glass tube that was supposed to show how much fuel was left, but it barely worked right unless the car was parked on flat ground. The Zeta Sports version had a different engine, a ZF Sachs 498cc two-stroke engine with 18 to 21 horsepower. It also used the same trick with the engine running backward to get reverse gears. This version was faster, but not much more practical. Harold Lightburn removed the half doors from the sports model to make the body stronger, but that made getting in and out an awkward jump. In total, only about 363 sedans and runabouts were built, along with 14 utilities and around 48 sports models. Production ended by 1965, with some leftover cars sold in 1966. The Zeta was entered into the 1964 Ampol Trial, a 7,000-mile endurance rally, where one car finished and won a prize for its class under 350cc. People often say the Zeta was a failure. It was noisy, hard to drive, and odd-looking. It also had to compete with the Morris Mini, which was better built, easier to sell, and backed by real car dealers. But the Lightburn Zeta was not just a car. It was a cement mixer company's brave shot at the car world, full of odd ideas and stubborn engineering. Even if it did not work out, it sure made a story worth telling. In the remote deserts of Western Australia, something unusual began to take shape in the late 1980s. It was not another massive mining truck or a fancy city car. This was something different. Big, square, and strong-looking, it came from the minds of people who worked in the dirt and heat. They were not car designers or racing engineers. They were mining executives, and they wanted a vehicle that could carry heavy loads, survive brutal terrain, and not fall apart in the outback. This is the story of the OKAXT 4x4, a machine born in beer chats and built for battle. It is a story of rough roads, broken dreams, and a comeback. The story starts in 1986 in Perth, Western Australia. A group of mining executives realized they could not find a vehicle tough enough for their jobs. They wanted something with a 3-ton payload, real off-road strength. and parts that could be fixed in the middle of nowhere. So they did what anyone would do in that situation. They made one. Using a market study of over 1,200 users from industries like mining, defense, farming, and tourism, they created the first prototype in 1987. After several years of testing, they released the first production version in 1994. They called it the OKA XT. The XT came with a Perkins Phaser 4.0-litre diesel engine, pushing around 110 horsepower and 260 pound-feet of torque. Not fast, but very strong. It used a 5-speed Dana Spicer manual transmission and a Rockwell 2-speed transfer case. Axles were from Dana, with leaf springs and live axle suspension. Ventilated disc brakes were used on all 4 wheels. This setup gave it serious off-road skill. It had about 9.3 inches of ground clearance, an approach angle of 41 degrees, and a departure angle of 35 degrees. It could tow up to 15,400 pounds and carried a gross vehicle weight of 12,100 pounds. There were many versions of the OKA. There was a single cab, dual cab, multi-cab, and bus versions. The buses were especially popular in tour operations, like the Cuba Pedy Mail run. There were also camper versions with pop-up roofs, but the Perkins engine was not very popular. Many owners replaced it with Cummins 4-cylinder or 6-cylinder engines, and even added Allison automatic gearboxes for smoother driving. By the late 1990s, about 449 OKAs had been made. The company had high hopes and even made plans to sell in the United Arab Emirates and Europe, but money problems hit hard. In 2011, after some financial mismanagement, OKA folded. However, in 2018, a former parts supplier bought the rights and brought it back under the name OKA All-Terrain Vehicles. The NT generation came after the XT and LT. It featured new upgrades like a Cummins engine, 6-speed Allison automatic, and even 24-volt electrics. The NT01 prototype, also known as the 433rd OKA, was built between 2003 and 2006. Despite its square body and bumpy ride, the OKA has a loyal following. Some owners have driven over 600,000 miles. At one meetup, 39 OKAs showed up. Not bad for a vehicle that once died and came back. It might not win beauty contests, but it wins hearts, one dusty mile at a time. In the late 1960s, something unusual was cooking deep in Australia's car world. It was not another family sedan or a racing legend. It was something so different, people thought it looked like a spaceship. This strange and sleek machine was called the Holden Hurricane. Built not for sales but for science, the Hurricane had one job: to show what the future could look like on 4 wheels. But the Hurricane was not just a dream car from the sky. It was real, it had a working engine, and it almost disappeared forever. The Holden Hurricane, known behind the scenes as RD001, was first revealed in May 1969 at the Melbourne Motor Show. It came from Holden, General Motors' Australian branch. A team of engineers and designers led this project, including chief engineers Bill Steinhagen and Bern Ambor. The design was handled by Ken Genest, working under the direction of Don DeHarsh. Their idea was to test advanced technology using one experimental car. The result was a 2-seater concept car that was only 39 inches tall, lower than even the famous Ford GT40. The Hurricane had a wedge-shaped body and no doors. Instead, it had a one-piece hydraulic canopy that swung forward over the front wheels. When the canopy opened, the seats and the steering column rose up so the driver and passenger could get in. Then they dropped back down and locked in place. It was more like getting into a jet cockpit than a car. Inside, the car had many features that were very unusual at the time. It had a Pathfinder navigation system, which worked using magnets in the road. This early version of GPS gave steering directions through the dashboard. There was a reversing camera with a screen because the car had no rear window. It also came with digital instruments, an automatic climate system called Comfortron, an auto-seeking radio, tilt steering, and pedals that could be moved forward or back. The seatbelts were inertia reel types, which were new at the time. Underneath the fiberglass body was a steel frame. The Hurricane used a Holden 253 cubic inch V8 engine. It produced around 260 horsepower at 6,000 revolutions per minute. This engine was placed in the middle of the car and power went to the rear wheels. It used a 4-speed manual transaxle that was designed in-house by Holden engineers. The Hurricane also had oil-cooled front disc brakes and vented rear discs, with wheels cast at Holden's own foundry. It could go from 0 to 60 miles per hour in about 5.9 seconds and finish a quarter mile in roughly 13 seconds. After its show days ended, the Hurricane was put into storage. A cracked windscreen made it hard to display, and it sat unused for years. In the 1990s, apprentices tried to restore it, but it was almost scrapped more than once. Designers like Leo Pruno helped save it. In 2006, a full restoration began, led by Paul Clark and Rick Martin, with support from Ed Welburn and Mark Rose. After 5 years, the car returned to public view at Motor Classica 2011 in Melbourne. The Hurricane never became a production car, but it did help create Holden's 253 V8 engine, which powered many Holden cars until 1984. The Hurricane showed ideas that were far ahead of its time, like GPS and backup cameras. It was not built to sell, but to think. And it definitely got people thinking. Have you ever seen a car that looks like it came straight from a racing movie, but was actually built in a backyard workshop? In the 1950s, something unusual was happening in Australia. A man named Nat Buchanan decided to take a wrecked British race car, some fiberglass, and a whole lot of ambition, and made something totally unique. It looked like an Aston Martin, but it was not. It was something else entirely, something lighter, stranger, and made almost completely by hand. What came from that odd mix of parts and plans became known as the Buchanan Fiberglass Special. This is the story of a car that nearly nobody knows, but should. Nat Buchanan lived in Annandale, a suburb in New South Wales, Australia. He ran a small company called the N.H. Buchanan Motor Company. In the early 1950s, Nat noticed a growing trend. People were building their own cars from kits, using lightweight materials and racing technology. Fiberglass was still pretty new at the time, but Nat saw the potential. It was strong, it was light, and it did not rust like steel. One day he got the chance to work with something special, a damaged Aston Martin DB3S that had been raced by Tom Sulman. The car was bent up and bruised, but Buchanan saw something more. He used the body of that car to make molds for his own design. From those molds, Nat Buchanan created the Buchanan body shell. It was made in one solid piece of fiberglass. The bonnet, wings, roof, boot, and firewall were all one part. The only separate pieces were the doors and the hood. At a time when most cars were still made from heavy steel, this was a bold move. The body was designed to fit onto a custom-built chassis. Buchanan did not copy any standard frame. Instead, he built his own, complete with a transverse leaf spring front suspension. That setup made the car feel more like a race car than a family sedan. Under the hood, owners could fit either a Ford Consul or Ford Zephyr engine. The engines came in different tunes, depending on how much power people wanted. Some were built for weekend drives. Others were built for track days. The fiberglass body helped keep the weight low, giving the car solid performance. It is hard to say exactly how fast it was, but it was fast enough to make you spill your tea. To promote the car, Nat Buchanan and his team took it to the racetrack. They believed that racing would prove the strength of the fiberglass body and the clever design. It worked. The Buchanan cars were entered into local races across Australia. They never became big winners, but they did turn heads. People started buying the body kits to build their own versions, usually with open tops and home-built frames. The Buchanan Fiberglass Special became a favorite among backyard builders who wanted something light, sporty, and different. Today, not many Buchanan cars survive, but the story does. It is a piece of Australian automotive history, shaped by hand and moulded from an old Aston Martin. It might not be famous, but it sure is unforgettable, especially when you find out it was all started by one man, a busted race car, and a bucket of fiberglass.